Question.
I'm interested in a comment on what I would call masochism. That word seems extreme to the average person for what I'm thinking of, but it seems pretty aptly put for the thing I'm thinking of. So
Let's look up the etymology. I'm wondering if it's related to the Marquis de Sade, but let's find out.
okay.
And I'll just kind of talk in the background. Masochism is a very interesting notion, and it's become much more current in the last 150 years, 100 years, something like that. And I'm not sure how it was described by the ancients, or if it was described by the ancients. In the old days, if you wanted to get punished, it probably was pretty easy to arrange. But what do we have there from the dictionary?
Okay, so
Etymology, I hope.
yeah. This etymology dictionary, online etymology dictionary, masochism, is, quote, sexual pleasure in being hurt or abused, end quote. 1892 from German Masochismus. Coined 1883 by German neurologist Richard von Krafft-Ebing. From name of Leopold von Sacher-Masoch, Austrian utopian socialist novelist who enshrined his submissive sexuality in, quote, Venus in Furs, end quote.
Ah, yes. Okay, all right, good. I'm glad we looked it up. So it's very recent, extremely recent. And it's tied to sex, which is fascinating also. And so some of these guys were really quite extraordinary. They were aristocrats, they were filthy rich. The idea that they're socialists, I think, is fascinating. When you think about it, it's kind of a strange way to approach life and sex. But they really enjoyed the masochism, and since then it's become a whole like theme, sexual theme. I mean, a major one. And you see people walking around in leather, barely disguised, SS costumes, frankly, and they're beating each other up and whipping each other and doing all that, having a great old time with sexual masochism. I'll leave that there. If you want to learn more, you can find out whatever you need to know online, I'm sure, and more than that. But with regard to psychological masochism, 1883 is like 7 years before Freud, 17 years before Freud is going to come out with his interpretation of dreams, a beautiful book, which reminds me to mention that when it comes to the interpretation of dreams, you have to at least go back as far as the Persians and the Spanish and the Arabic-speaking peoples, 8th century, 9th century, and then you probably go back from there, right? So we didn't study any of that, which is ridiculous. But the interpretation of dreams is a Sufi specialty. And then, of course, the Tibetans have dream yoga. And so there's much fun to be had, things to be learned in the study of dreams. In terms of psychological masochism, it refers to someone who paradoxically enjoys, frankly, I'll just speak from my experience, usually it's guilt. They just revel in the guilt. They love to feel the shame and the guilt, but they won't never say this, right? Because it's ostensibly a painful circumstance. But they I don't know any other way to put it. They revel. They wallow in guilt. They wallow in frankly, that's self-importance. They wallow in thinking that they're the center of the universe, and because they've committed this sin, now the whole universe is going to collapse on them because the whole universe cares, right? Or the whole universe is watching, or whatever. And that may or may not be true. But what I'm trying to describe here is just that for some people psychologically, guilt, shame, humiliation, not so much embarrassment. That's interesting. Not embarrassment. But the other three, and there's much more, they find psychological gratification of some sort in that. And so one does not take that away from someone. If one recognizes that, you don't take it away from someone or necessarily from yourself, you try and understand it, like everything else. You try and understand it. Because I mean, all of us maybe have some strands of this in here, but this one I think I'm having a I remember, just as another data point, someone asked the Dalai Lama once about low self-esteem. And the Dalai Lama, you know how he scratches his head and he turns to his translator, and the translator says, yeah, in Tibetan, low self-esteem. And he goes, huh? What? I mean, it's kind of nuts. The whole notion of self-esteem, when the self is imaginary to begin with, the whole thing's kind of crazy. It makes no sense whatsoever. But so some of these concepts are totally alien to other cultures, and this may be one. And I'll stop there, but I should probably read up a bit on it. It's not a term that you like to throw around too much, but keep it in the back of your mind, especially if you're a coach, especially if you're a therapist, or you're a student studying your own mind, because people develop ego defense mechanisms for a reason. And if they've been there long enough, they start to enjoy it. And I think it's Stephen Crane, a beautiful poem. I met a man in the desert. He was sitting in the dust naked, eating his heart. I said, sir, what are you doing? He said, I'm eating my heart. I said, why are you eating your heart? He replied, because it's mine and it's bitter. That's Stephen Crane, the poet, short poem on somebody eating their own bitter heart. Some people, people like what they know. I'll stop there.